Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video, as you can see, I'm reviewing the Nikon D850 and I've been using it for a year now. Now this camera has been really good to me over the past year. I've been using it mostly for portraits, sometimes weddings of course when I have them. And so this review is going to be mostly from a portrait photographer's perspective, and hopefully if you're on the fence about purchasing this camera, this review will help you out as to if you are or aren't going to buy the D850 in 2019. So we're going to be talking about a lot of different things about this camera, some of the great things and maybe some of the bad things as well. I don't know, we'll just see where the review goes. But I want to talk about the first thing, which is the image quality output. So let's get right into that. I'm going to be throwing up various different images and different examples on this so you can see what the image quality output looks like. But let me tell you, the 45.7 megapixel sensor in this thing is just spectacular. I mean, I gotten some really great colors from this. Of course, the different contrast, sharpness, the detail in this 45 megapixel sensor is just phenomenal. And when you zoom in like 2:1, 3:1, 4:1 even, you still have remarkably a lot of detail in the image. And as a portrait photographer, that can be very important. At least for me it is. And so, you know, when I was using this camera, I was really impressed with the quality of images coming out of this. And I even took some of the images and printed them. And just the outstanding quality, once again, that I was getting even in the prints is just pretty awesome. The Nikon D850 is no slouch when it comes to image quality. And if you're looking for a great sensor in a camera, well, the D850 definitely has that. The next thing I want to talk about is the autofocus performance of the Nikon D850. Now, this borrows the Nikon D5's autofocus system. It has 153 autofocus points, and 99 of those are cross-type, which normally cross-type autofocus points are more accurate than non-cross-type autofocus points. Anyway, so I've been using this for the past year, and I've been actually fairly impressed with the autofocus system in the D850. I would say that it's not the best autofocus system I've ever used in my life. You know, like the A7 III has a great autofocus system. And, you know, I've actually been slightly disappointed in some situations and with some lenses with how the autofocus accuracy was doing. I mean, when I was using faster lenses like 1.4 or 1.8 lenses, it didn't really seem that accurate. Now, of course, it's hard to get, you know, things in focus with the shallow depth of field and all of that. When it did hit on with those lenses, when the autofocus point hit and it was solid, super sharp, as I said before, a lot of detail in the images, and you know, it was just really exciting to see the images that came off of this thing and how the autofocus performed, at least when it performed correctly. Overall, I'm pretty impressed with the Nikon D850's autofocus system. Now, whether you're a portrait photographer, a wedding photographer, or a sports photographer, you know that battery life is extremely important. Now, you don't want to be in the middle of taking a crazy good shot and then your battery dies because then you missed the shot, missed the moment, and that's gone forever. So it's really important to have a camera that does have good battery life. I will say that the Nikon D850 does seem to have pretty decent battery life. I was getting between 700 to 1300 shots per charge, which in my book is pretty good. Now, I know there are some cameras that seem to get more than that, and that's great, but you know, for the type of sensor this is, for the heft of this camera, and for the things you can do with it, that many shots per charge is pretty good. So I really cannot complain about battery life on the Nikon D850. All right, in this camera, there is only one card slot. Just kidding, guys. There are two card slots, and basically you have one XQD card and one SD UHS-2 card in it, okay? So they're very quick cards, and especially if you're shooting bursts, whether it's at the native 7 frames a second or with the extended battery grip with 9 frames a second, this camera will deliver in terms of writing speeds and getting you back to shooting immediately. So, you know, I've really enjoyed using actually the XQD card format. And what's kind of nice is that eventually once we get CF Express cards, this camera, I believe with the firmware update, should be compatible with that card as well. So that's really exciting. So yes, two card slots. Yeah, it kind of is a downside. There are two different medias, you know, XQD and SD, but at the end of the day, for me, it doesn't really matter. Now, unlike the newly released Z7 and Z6, this is not a mirrorless camera and it still has your traditional optical viewfinder. I honestly really enjoy shooting through this viewfinder. It's nice and large, and yeah, unfortunately all the autofocus points are kind of squished to the center, but it's still really nice to look through, very clear, very crisp, and you can tell when things are in focus, out of focus, it's pretty obvious. So in terms of the optical viewfinder in this camera, I'm really impressed with it. And you know, when I did have my D750, when I was switched between the D850 and the D750, like it was night and day a difference. You could tell it was much larger on the D850, and it was just, in my opinion, a more pleasurable experience shooting through. So yes, optical viewfinder in the D850 is awesome. Now, if you're going to plan to shoot in manual focus a lot, I would recommend using the live view on the back screen. The back screen on the Nikon D850 is pretty awesome because not only is it super sharp, but it's also a touch screen. And so when I've been doing portraits and stuff, I really found it useful that I could actually use the touch screen to my advantage, whether it was double tapping on the screen to go to 100% or just swiping through my photos, or even just swiping through the menu to change settings. I really have enjoyed using the touchscreen on this camera, and as I mentioned, it's very sharp, so when you zoom in to get your manual focus, it's super easy, really quick, and you really should not have any problems with the screen on the Nikon D850. Now in this part of the video, I really want to talk about some of my favorite things about the Nikon D850. I'll start with the ISO sensitivity. This thing goes down to 64 ISO, which is freaking awesome if you're in a very bright, let's say very sunny day, you're taking some portraits, or maybe you're taking, a landscape or something. It's really great to shoot down at 64 ISO. The images come out really clean and it's just really beautiful to look at. Another thing I like about this camera is that when you're shooting in live view, you can actually use focus peaking. And it's been really fun using that, especially when I'm doing manual focus, whether I have a manual focus lens or I'm using the D850 for video. It's really nice that Nikon added focus peaking into the D850. Now recently I've gotten into astrophotography, and it's really important that you don't shine any light, unless you're doing, like light painting, on or near the camera while it's doing its long exposure, because you don't want light pollution to affect the final image. So it's really nice that this camera has backlit buttons on it, and that's one of my favorite features on this, because I can still look at what I'm doing and know what I'm doing, what buttons I'm pushing, without adding any light pollution to my image. So Nikon, you get a thumbs up for that. The final thing in this review I'm going to talk about is just my overall shooting experience with this camera. Now, as I said in much of this review, I've really enjoyed shooting with the Nikon D850 over the last year. I like that it's a big, hefty camera and it feels solid in my hand. Many people actually are impressed when I pull the camera out. They're like, whoa, that's a big camera, and it's actually, really fun to see the reactions. But, just the shooting experience has been awesome. I really have not had a problem with this camera. The autofocus works really well. And of course, as I said, the final images that come off of this thing are just beautiful. So shooting experience, having fun with the camera, doing different things with the camera has been really great. So would I recommend this camera in 2019? The answer is absolutely. Look, if you're looking for a phenomenal camera that's going to get the job done, give you a lot of detail because of its high megapixel count, and just ultimately be a great camera as it is, then yes, go out and buy the Nikon D850 today. You really will not be disappointed. Guys, thanks for watching my video, and if you're interested in picking up the Nikon D850, well, go to the link in the description below and you can buy it from there. Helps my channel out, so I'd really appreciate it. I hope you all have a great day, and remember to get out there, take some shots, and do what you love. Belingo out.